Imagine working 200 feet at the bottom of the ocean, in pitch blackness. Suddenly, the air in your helmet tastes like sugar, and the voice of your dead wife comes over the radio, begging you to take your helmet off. That's story number 1. Tonight we have 4, and they only get stranger from there. What is up, guys? Welcome back. Tonight we have 4 stories from r/nosleep, so get comfortable, enjoy the video, and while you're watching, I'll be out here surviving in Minecraft. Story 1. Something in the deep. To understand what happened, you have to understand how the job works. He is a commercial deep-sea diver, not the kind you picture with a tank on his back swimming through coral reefs. His job is heavy construction work, done in a pitch-black sensory deprivation tank where the environment is actively trying to crush you. He wears a heavy, rigid brass and fiberglass diving helmet that completely encloses his head, locked into a thick rubber dry suit, connected to the surface ship by something called an umbilical cord. A thick bundle of hoses bound together, his main breathing gas supply, a depth gauge, a communications wire to talk to his supervisor on the surface, and a hot water hose that keeps him from freezing to death in the deep ocean. When you are working 200 feet down, you are entirely dependent on that umbilical. It is your lifeline. If it gets cut, you have a small emergency bailout bottle on your back that gives you a few minutes of air, but at that depth, you are usually too far gone to make a safe ascent. You live and die by the umbilical, and by the voice of your supervisor in your headset. They were out on a repair job in the open ocean. A massive crude oil pipeline had suffered structural damage. His job was to go down, locate the damaged section, grind out the cracks, and weld a massive steel patch over the pipe. The dive started like any other. He geared up on deck. The weather topside was grey and rough, but once you get deep enough, the surface weather does not matter. The ocean below is terrifyingly still. His tender lowered the heavy brass helmet over his head. He felt the solid, reassuring weight of it settle onto his shoulders. The latches locked. The outside world disappeared. The only thing he could hear was the loud hiss of his breathing gas and the crackle of the communication speaker by his ear. Comms check, how do you read me, buddy? Loud and clear. Gas flow is green. Hot water is pumping. You are clear to drop. He stepped off the diving stage and sank into the water. The first 50 feet of a descent are always the same. Bright clear blue. The hull of the ship visible above. Bubbles rising from the exhaust valve. But as you drop deeper, the light starts to fail. The blue turns to a dark murky green. The temperature plummets. By the time he passed 100 feet, the green water faded into absolute black. Down there, the darkness is complete. 0 light penetration. He clicked on the heavy halogen headlamp mounted to his helmet. The beam cut through the water, illuminating a thick soup of floating sediment, but it only reached about 10 feet before the darkness swallowed it entirely. He hit the bottom at 200 feet. Soft, thick, grey mud. A cloud of silt kicked up around him, reducing visibility to 0. He found the pipeline, half buried in the silt, covered in marine growth. He set up his workstation, dragged the heavy grounding clamp to the pipe, struck the arc. A blinding flash of green and white light exploded in the water around him. For the first hour, everything went exactly according to protocol. He ground down the cracks, positioned the heavy steel plate, began laying down the first bead of weld. The buzzing of the welding torch and the hiss of his breathing gas became a hypnotic soundtrack. He was fully in the zone. Then he noticed the taste. The breathing gas, supplied to commercial divers, has a very distinct stale flavor. Cold rubber, compressed air, a faint hint of machine oil. You get completely used to it. But as he finished his second welding pass, the air flowing into his helmet changed. It tasted sweet. A bizarre, overwhelming sweetness. Like spun sugar. Like heavy vanilla frosting. It coated the back of his tongue and the roof of his mouth. He stopped welding, powered down the torch. The blinding light vanished. He took a deep breath. The sweet taste was undeniable. Thick, almost syrupy in his lungs. Topside, check the gas mix on the panel. The air down here tastes weird. A pause. Gauges are all in the green. O2 levels are perfect. Filters are clean. What does it taste like? Sweet. Like sugar. Copy. That's unusual, but the mix is perfectly nominal. Are you feeling dizzy? Any signs of a hit? He did a quick mental check. Touched his thumb to each finger in order. 1, 2, 3, 4. Motor skills intact, not dizzy. I feel fine, just a weird taste. I'll keep working. He picked up the welding torch again, but he didn't strike the arc, because suddenly, he did feel fuzzy. It hit him like a heavy, thick blanket of pure warmth. The bitter cold of the ocean seemed to vanish entirely. A deep radiating heat bloomed in the center of his chest and spread down to his fingertips. His muscles relaxed. The heavy brass helmet felt comfortable. It felt safe. He looked down at his hands. They seemed far away, like they belonged to someone else. The welding torch slipped from his fingers and tumbled slowly into the silt. He watched it fall without any urgency. It didn't matter. Nothing felt urgent anymore. He stood there in the absolute darkness at the bottom of the ocean, completely warm, completely at peace. And then the radio crackled. Hey. The voice was soft, gentle, and utterly impossible. He knew that voice. He would know it anywhere. It was his wife. She had been dead for 2 years. Hey, she said again. It's me. He couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. I've been down here, she said. Her voice was warm and patient, the exact same tone she used when she called him at work to check in. I've been waiting for you. I knew you'd come eventually. That's, he started. He couldn't finish the sentence. You sound surprised, she said with a small laugh. Her laugh. Her exact laugh. I've missed you so much, she said softly. I've been so cold down here, and so lonely. Something was wrong. He knew something was wrong, but the warmth in his chest was so overwhelming, and her voice was so perfectly her, that the part of his brain screaming at him felt very small and very far away. Come be with me, she said. All you have to do is open the helmet. Just pop the latches. It'll only take a second, and then we can be together. He raised his hands toward the brass latches at his collarbone. It won't hurt, she said gently. I promise it won't hurt. His fingers found the heavy locking mechanism. I love you, she said. I love you too, he whispered. He pulled the pin halfway out. Emergency blow-up! His supervisor's voice roared through the static. On the surface, the supervisor had been watching his depth and breathing patterns. He realized his diver had lost his mind. He slammed his hand down on the primary gas supply valve, opening it to maximum pressure. A massive, violent explosion of compressed air roared down the umbilical cord. The air hit his helmet with the force of a freight train. The sound was deafening. The pressure regulator inside the helmet went into a massive free flow. The air blasted into his dry suit. In less than a second, the heavy rubber suit inflated to its maximum capacity. Ballooned outward, his arms and legs were forced straight out by the pressure. He physically could not bend his elbows. He could not even reach his helmet. The sudden massive increase in buoyancy was violently powerful. He was ripped off the seafloor. His heavy lead boots, completely useless against the extreme upward force. He shot upward into the black water like a torpedo. The speed of the ascent was terrifying. flying blindly toward the surface. As he rocketed upward, the umbilical cord snapped completely taut. Something was wrapped around the hoses, a translucent, glowing creature. Its barbs sunk deep into the rubber. As the massive upward drag of his inflated suit hit it, the thick, clear tendrils snapped tight. The rubber hose stretched and groaned under the tension, with a sickening tearing sensation that vibrated all the way down to his helmet. The umbilical violently ripped itself free from the creature's grip. As he tore past it, flying upward at a deadly speed, his headlamp illuminated its central mass. He was only a few feet away. He looked directly into the clear, gelatinous bell of the jellyfish-like thing. Inside the pulsing, glowing jelly, suspended in the center of the creature, was a face. A human face. The face of a man. Eyes wide open, milky white, completely dead. His skin pale and bloated, perfectly preserved inside the gelatinous fluid. Thick, clear veins running from the creature's body directly into the man's neck and temples. His mouth hanging open, he flew past the creature in a fraction of a second. Ascending from 200 feet in a matter of seconds is a death sentence. The compressed nitrogen in his bloodstream began to rapidly expand. The air in his lungs swelled. He screamed, forcing his mouth open, blowing the air out of his lungs as hard as he could, so they would not physically rupture. The pain hit him before he broke the surface. 1,000,000 tiny shards of broken glass injected directly into his veins. His joints locked up in sheer agony. The nitrogen was bubbling in his blood, turning it to foam. He hit the surface in an explosion of white water and foam, screaming in blinding pain. The deck crew hauled him out of the water. He collapsed onto the steel deck, his vision going black, feeling his blood vessels tearing. They dragged him directly to the hyperbaric decompression chamber, shoved him inside, slammed the heavy door shut. The chamber immediately began to hiss loudly. The supervisor was blowing the chamber down, rapidly pumping compressed air into the steel room to simulate the pressure of the deep ocean. He had to crush the nitrogen bubbles back down into a liquid state in his diver's blood before they stopped his heart or caused a massive stroke. As the pressure increased, the blinding agony in his joints slowly began to recede. He lay on the floor of the chamber, gasping for air, staring up at the steel ceiling. The intercom crackled. "We got you, buddy. You're going to be in the chamber for a few days for treatment, but you're alive." He just lay there, shivering. What happened down there? The system showed you reaching for your latches. You were going to pop your hat at 200 feet. Why the hell would you do that? He thought about the sweet taste in the air, about the deep, absolute euphoria, about the voice of his dead wife, sounding so perfect, so real, begging him to open the helmet so she could hold him. And he thought about the dead, milky eyes of the man suspended inside the translucent jelly, wired into the creature. "I don't know," he lied. "Narcosis. The mix must have been bad. I panicked. I just lost my mind." That was a week ago. The doctors say he will survive, though he might have permanent joint pain. The company has concluded the incident was entirely his fault. They are terminating his contract the moment he steps off the ship. He agreed to all of it. He signed the reports. He is not going to fight them. He just wants to get back to dry land. He is writing this from his phone because he knows there are other divers out there, men and women working in the pitch black, trusting their umbilical cords, completely isolated from the world above. If you are down there in the dark and your air suddenly tastes like sugar, if you feel a sudden warm wave of happiness that makes the freezing water feel comfortable, do not trust it. And if you hear the voice of someone you love calling out to you over the radio, keep your hands by your sides, close your eyes, and scream for topside to pull you up immediately, because the person you love is not down there in the dark, but something else is. Alright, that last one was about something that found a voice, the perfect voice. This next one is about something that found a face, A whole person. Someone you grew up with. Someone you would recognize anywhere. Story 2. I ran into an old friend last week. She heard all 3 syllables of her first name echo from across a gas station parking lot before she even saw who was calling. It was early morning, the highway still quiet. She had one hand on her car door and the other clutching a Red Bull. The voice was familiar, but not in a way she could immediately place. By the time she looked up, the woman was already walking toward her, waving like they had just seen each other yesterday. She squinted for a second too long, not because she didn't recognize her, because she did. They had met in 2nd grade. Ginger hair cut into a flat bob. Her family had just moved down from Chicago. They had been sat next to each other because she was good at making people feel welcome. Spent the entire morning whispering and exchanging giggles. Then they discovered their birthdays were on the exact same day. Down to the year. They both just stared at each other for a moment after that, like they had accidentally stumbled into their own secret kingdom. Elementary school, middle school, high school, a friendship that bent and stretched and came back together. Always came back together. COVID lockdowns, spent in her bedroom talking until one of them fell asleep mid-sentence. Bathroom breaks between classes that stretched to 20 minutes. Late nights on her back porch, passing things back and forth and laughing too hard at nothing. By sophomore year, whatever they were had stopped having a clear shape. It felt like more than friendship, so much more. But she could never find a way to say it that didn't feel like it would change something she didn't want to lose. So she never said it, and eventually things drifted. She moved away, got an apartment, got a life. And that was that, or so she thought. Standing in that parking lot at 6 in the morning, her old friend looked exactly the same. Maybe a little older, but the same smile, the same way of tilting her head when she was listening. They got coffee, sat by the window, talked about the years in between, catching up. Normal, fine. Then the friend mentioned something about them being attached at the hip back then. And something shifted. She started bringing up little things, details about her life, things she hadn't told her, personal things. So things are good with you and your mom right now? Yeah. We haven't had a big argument since around graduation. Huh. I thought you missed your period that month, though. She blinked. She hadn't told anyone about that. What does that have to do with anything? Oh, sorry. I thought you guys usually only argue right before your period starts. An awkward pause. She let it wash over them. The friend moved on quickly. Launched into a story about her own mom, but she stopped really listening. She was watching instead. The way her tone flattened in the same place as hers does when she stops trying to sound interested. The way she was holding pauses. She told herself she was imagining it. Then she noticed something she hadn't thought about in years. There is a small divot on the inside of her right nostril. When she was a kid, she had an angioma there. Her mom had it removed in 4th grade. It is not noticeable unless you point it out, the kind of thing she thinks about in passing. She looked at her friend more carefully. It was there, the same small dip, in the exact same spot. Her stomach twisted. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraped too loudly against the floor. She didn't say anything. She walked out fast, left her almost untouched coffee behind. She didn't look back for long, but when she did, the woman was still sitting there by the window, eyes wide and trained on her, still smiling. Like the conversation hadn't ended, she got in her car and drove. Her phone buzzed while she was merging onto the highway, her friend's name on the screen. A wave of nausea crashed over her. She barely pulled onto the shoulder before heaving, just pure bile. She doesn't remember getting back to her apartment. She checked every lock twice when she got inside. Front door, deadbolt, chain, balcony, windows. She knew she had to open the text. The preview popped up. One word. Gotcha. She called out of work for the next 2 days. Told everyone it was a stomach flu. Avoided all her usual spots. Straight to work and back. Then her roommate texted her. "What's up with your number?" She paused. Before she could respond, another message came through. You texted me this morning from a new one, Lowell. She hadn't texted anyone that morning. That night at 11 p.m., her mom called. Hey, sweetie, why does your location show you're at your apartment when I'm looking at you standing outside the door? What? Someone just knocked. Said they forgot their keys and needed to come in. They sound exactly like you. Mom, that's not me. Don't open the door. Call the police. Her mom went quiet for a second. Then very softly she spoke again. She keeps pulling at her sleeves like you do. Another knock through the phone. 3 quiet taps against the front door. Then her own voice. Muffled. But hers. Mom, please. You know it's me. 2 down, 2 to go. That one got under your skin slowly. This next one does not take its time. This one hits you in the first 5 minutes and doesn't let go. A fire crew gets called to a supermarket that has been abandoned for 10 months. Someone is trapped inside. What they find in there is not someone. Story 3. The abandoned supermarket. The call came in after they had already gone to bed for the night. The station's blaring loudspeaker alarm forced him out of a state of half-slumber. Fire response. His phone read, forcible entry, victim trapped inside a building. He stepped out of his bunk and made his way to the gear room. It was a cold night in the dead of winter. Osgood and Fuller already had their turnout pants on. Price, their driver, was already in the driver's seat of the rescue. The guys always said Price didn't sleep when he worked overnights. Just sat in the bay all night waiting for the call that may not even be coming. Fuller and he jumped into the cab. Osgood climbed into the officer's seat up front. Price had the rescue peeling out of the bay before he even had his seatbelt on. You've got the address, right, Price? Yeah. Do you recognize it? Yeah. How could somebody possibly be trapped in there? I don't know, but I don't like it. He asked what was so weird about the address. It's the address of that supermarket that shut down a while back, Fuller said. Not just shut down, Osgood said. 10 months ago, it was completely abandoned out of the blue. It's been closed up ever since. There's no way somebody could be trapped in there. Maybe some teenagers broke in. The call came from the landline in the office at the back of the store, Fuller said. Whoever made the call definitely made it from inside the building. Osgood found the old pre-plan in his binder. They would pull around back and enter through the rear door. He took the Halligan. Fuller took the axe. They put their packs on. Osgood wanted everyone on air, not taking any chances with the air quality in a place sealed up for 10 months. When the rescue pulled to a stop behind the building, the supermarket looked exactly like what it was. A place that had been abandoned suddenly. No warning. No explanation. Just shut and left. The rear door took 2 good swings with the flat of Fuller's axe to break the lock. They pushed inside. The storage area beyond was dark and completely still. A stale smell hit him immediately. Not just the smell of disuse. Something organic. Something wrong. They moved through the storage area. The beams of their flashlights swept across shelves, still stocked with product. Cardboard boxes that had bloated and begun to sag, cans starting to rust. Osgood split the crew into 2 search teams. He and Price took one direction. Fuller and Osgood took the other. They pushed through the swinging doors into the main floor of the store. His flashlight swept up and down the aisles. The shelves were still stocked. Cans of beans, boxes of pasta, bags of chips that had long since gone stale inside their packaging. The floor was a mess of dust, and something that looked like dark mold spreading in slow patches from the corners. Then Price grabbed his arm and stopped walking. He pointed his beam at something on the floor. A long, dark smear running between the shelves. Too wide to be water damage. Too irregular to be mold. It disappeared around the corner of the next aisle. They followed it. It led them deeper into the store. The smell was getting stronger now. That organic wrongness. Thicker, warmer, like something living. They rounded the corner. His flashlight landed on it. A tendril, long and pale and glistening, stretched across the floor between the shelves. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. He stood completely still. It was the size of a garden hose, covered in something that looked like mold, but the texture beneath it was unmistakably meat. "What is that?" he whispered. Price didn't answer. The tendril shifted, a slow, lazy movement, like something stirring in sleep. They backed away slowly, then Price's feet were pulled out from under him. He landed on his back with a terrible crash and began sliding along the mouldy floor. Dragged into the darkness, he rushed after him, but he was moving too fast. Price managed to grab onto a shelf divider, held on. He caught up and brought the halogen down on the tendril wrapped around Price's leg. It severed. Both ends writhed on the floor. The piece still wrapped around Price released its grip. The longer section darted away into the darkness. He helped Price to his feet. They stood there, catching their breath, looking at the severed tendrils still squirming on the floor. An unholy union of fungus and meat. "We need to get out of here," Price said. Then he heard the hissing sound. Price's air cylinder had ruptured when the thing grabbed him. His supply was depleting fast. "Not until we find the others," Price said. He tried his radio. "Search Team 2 to Search Team 1. Come in, Ozzy. Are you there?" Silence. "Ozman, Fuller, are either of you there?" Nothing. Then a horrible, screeching wail came blaring through both of their radios. So loud they could hear their original sound coming from the other side of the building. A cry of primal, desperate distress. Then the blaring alarm of a pass device. The motion sensor that activates when a firefighter stops moving. They ran, rounded a corner, and stopped. The sound was coming from the space that had once served as the store's meat department. A gigantic mass of writhing, undulating, mold-infused meat grew from the remnants of the display case, which had long since ruptured from the pressure of what it now contained. The mycotic mound of once flesh squirmed and lurched as it continued to intrude into the surrounding space. They spotted Osgood, his meaty silhouette completely still as the wall of flesh consumed the last of his body. His pass alarm muffled as the mass closed around him, his flashing orange lights gleaming through the coffin of carrion before they too were completely ingested. Outlines of arms, legs, faces stretched from the squirming heap. Muted, agonized groans joining a chorus of indistinct voices calling out from within. "I can't get out," one of them seemed to say. Fuller stood at the very edge of the advancing mass. Several fleshy tendrils wrapped around his legs and hips and torso, pulling at him as he desperately swung his axe. He rushed to Fuller's side and began digging at the tendrils with the halogen. Fuller severed one. Two more took its place. One latched around his neck. Another splashed against his mask. The mask shattered, disconnecting his regulator. He only heard Fuller's scream for a brief moment, before the mass filled his mouth and nose and completely consumed his face. He instinctively stepped back. A tendril lashed out and grabbed his boot. Price grabbed Fuller's axe and brought it down on the matter, creeping up toward him. He pulled his foot free. "Come on!" Price turned and ran without looking back. They cut through the nearest aisle in their desperate flight toward the exit. Tendrils rushed toward them from every direction, both of them swinging their tools at the encroaching flesh. Fungal matter splattering against the shelves on either side. Then he realized he was running alone. He turned back. Price was crouched on the floor a few yards back, hacking at a regulator that was no longer providing oxygen. His low air alarm had been going off. How long had he been fighting while struggling to breathe? A tentacle exploded from the darkness and wrapped around Price's arm. He took a step toward him. Price used his free hand to rip his regulator free from his mask. "Go!" he shouted as spores filled his lungs. 2 more tendrils grabbed hold of him, pulling him deeper into the shadows. He didn't scream, even as they found the new opening in his mask. He turned and sprinted away. He reached the swinging doors, the storage area, the back hallway. The door to the outside was in sight. Something latched onto his back. He tore at his air pack straps while moving, pulled everything loose. One final gasp of air from his regulator before he tore it free, covered the opening with his hood, released the last strap. The air pack fell backward into the tendrils that so desperately pulled against it. He sprinted the rest of the way, tore open the metal door, scrambled onto the cement platform, slammed the door behind him. He ran halfway to the rescue before he finally pulled his hood away and took a huge, gasping breath. Fresh air had never tasted so good. He climbed into the officer's seat, reached for the radio on the center console. His hand froze before it got there. The speaker had come to life on its own. The anguished, tortured wails of his 3 lost companions. Coming through. 3 down, 1 to go. That last one was about something physical, something you could see, something you could hit with an axe. This last story is different. No creature, no monster with tentacles, just a live stream, a chess box, and something that followed her out of a screen and decided she was responsible for it now. Story 4, The Moderator. She has done a lot of moderating gigs in her life. She likes the feeling they give her, the sense of being the one who keeps things under control. She works for a popular streaming platform, picks up lives, gets paid by the hour, keeps the chat decent, removes slurs and hate speech, flags streams when things start to get weird, gore, nudity, illegal activity. It doesn't happen too often, but sometimes it does. One night she picked up a live from a channel called Nightshade Thief. Around 3,000 subscribers. The first few minutes showed a guy walking through the woods, late at night, looking around a lot, laughing somewhat nervously. Half his face covered by a COVID mask. Around 50 viewers at first. The chat already knew where